From the director who used his actress on set and confessed to it decades later,
I wanted her to react and she felt humiliated.
To another who was accused by almost 400 women in the largest sexual assault civil case in New York State history.
I saw all these women coming forward on Twitter. I was like, oh, that guy's harassed me too in New York 20 years ago.
Wow.
These are 8 Hollywood directors who were exposed as predators. Starting with Roman Polanski, who was arguably one of the greatest directors who has ever lived. He directed legendary movies like Rosemary's Baby, Chinatown, and The Pianist, for which he won an Oscar as Best Director. Polanski had a filmography that most directors would sacrifice everything to have, which ironically is almost exactly what he did. In March 1977, Polanski was 43 years old and already one of the most celebrated filmmakers in the world. He was also, at the moment, at Jack Nicholson's home in Los Angeles, in what was supposed to be a meeting with a 13-year-old girl named Samantha Gailey, now known as Samantha Geimer. It was a meeting that had been framed as a photo shoot. Polanski had told Samantha and her mother he was shooting for the French edition of Vogue magazine. And because he was a famous director, her family couldn't say no.
Powerful, very well known. I think when you're wealthy or powerful or well known, people don't say no to you, and you have like this different view of life where you're accustomed to getting what you want.
However, instead of shooting for Vogue as he had promised, Polanski gave Samantha champagne and Quaalude, a sedative. Then he photographed her before assaulting her.
When he said, leave the shirt off, I just thought, if he's asking me to do it, there must be a reason. This is part of the job.
During her grand jury testimony, Samantha revealed that despite her pleading for Polanski to stop several times, he didn't.
Like, I'd rather not, no, let's please, I'd rather go home.
He carried on until Nicholson's girlfriend, Angela Houston, knocked on their door. On her way home, Polanski tries to cover his tracks, telling Samantha this.
He knew what he was doing was wrong. He says to you not to tell your mum.
Right.
And so he's asking you.
Right.
He in fact says to you that for you and he to keep it as your little secret.
Which is kind of a creepy thing. And I just think when he saw me upset, then he realized that, started to worry about it in that kind of way.
Polanski was arrested and charged with 6 felonies, but then, like most famous people, he was given a plea deal, a negotiated agreement where he pleaded guilty to the single lesser charge of unlawful intercourse with a minor. For that charge, Polanski served 42 days at a California state prison as part of a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation. But then after his sentence, word got to him that the judge in charge of his case was trying to throw out a deal and sentence him to real prison. So he got on a plane, flew to London, then to France, and he never came back. Instead of paying for his crimes like every other person, Polanski tried to game the system. He knew that France does not extradite its own citizens, so he settled in Paris and kept working. He was directing films, winning awards, and living the life of a celebrated movie maker, while Samantha Gailey lived with what he had done to her. In a Los Angeles courtroom sat with an open case that could never be closed. In 2003, 25 years after he fled the United States as a convicted child offender, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences awarded Roman Polanski the Oscar for Best Director for The Pianist. He was not there to collect it in person, because if he set foot in American soil, he would be arrested. But the room gave him a standing ovation anyway.
Goes for Roman Polanski for The Pianist.
Despite what he did to a 13-year-old girl, Hollywood built him a pedestal and celebrated him as one of the goats of filmmaking. This made some viewers angry, with some leaving comments like, "Homeboy is literally an admitted child molester, and yet so many people are commenting about his filmmaking abilities." Roman Polanski has never served a single additional day in prison. And in 2024, nearly 50 years later, he quietly settled a separate civil lawsuit on the sexual assault of another minor in 1973. He's 91 years old and is still a free man. Just like this next director, who used to be one of Hollywood's most bankable names before he was exposed in what is one of the fastest falls from power in #MeToo history. Brett Ratner directed the Rush Hour franchise, one of the highest-grossing action comedy series in history. He was also in charge of producing X-Men: The Last Stand. He had a producing deal with Warner Bros., so in short, Brett Ratner had it all. He had the influence and access to some of the biggest names and projects in the industry. And then in the span of a single week in November 2017, he lost all of it.
Another Hollywood filmmaker faces accusations of sexual misconduct. The LA Times reports 6 women have come forward accusing Brett Ratner of sexual harassment and assault.
October 2017 was the month Harvey Weinstein's story broke, and the #MeToo movement exploded across Hollywood like a lit fuse. Women who had long stayed silent finally had a name. and a world ready to listen. Ratner, watching all of this unfold, might have thought he was safe. He wasn't. His fall from grace to grass started when the Los Angeles Times published an investigation featuring women who accused him of sexual harassment and misconduct. His first accuser was Natasha Henstridge, a Canadian actress best known for her role as Syl in the 1995 sci-fi movie Species. Natasha described an encounter in the early 1990s when she was just 19 years old. At the time, she was a fashion model, and Ratner was an up-and-coming music video director in his early 20s. Natasha was watching a movie on Brett Ratner's couch when she fell asleep. They'd been hanging out in front of the TV with friends at his New York apartment, but when she woke up, the others had left, and she was alone with Ratner. She tried to leave, but Ratner blocked the doorway with his body and began physically forcing himself on her. And at some point, Natasha gave in, allowing Ratner to have his way with her. Then Olivia Munn told her story. In 2004, she was working on the film set of After the Sunset, which Ratner was directing. Olivia had been asked to bring food to his trailer. She knocked, walked in, and found Ratner standing there with his pants down, masturbating. She wrote about the 2004 incident in a 2010 book titled Suck It, Wonder Woman, which prompted Ratner to claim in a 2011 interview that he used to date her and he banged her a few times, but forgot her, and that she made up all those stories. Olivia publicly denied his claims.
Obviously with my story, it all was public in 2011 with Brett Ratner taking credit for it, and yet the world didn't do anything, nobody cared, and I don't know why. When the pressure mounted, Ratner quietly walked the comment back, saying he had lied to impress the hosts, but it didn't stop there. A casting director named Ari Sasaki said Ratner touched her without her consent on the set of Rush Hour 2, and when she pulled away, Ratner had said, "Don't you want to be famous?" More women came forward with similar accounts, showing a pattern of Ratner using his position, his set, his office, and his reputation as weapons. And none of these women were strangers to him. They were colleagues, people who had been invited into professional spaces and then exploited in them. Some viewers noted how they've always suspected him, saying, "He was weird around women. He's a total creep who belongs behind bars. This isn't the first time. He's a predator." Ratner denied all these allegations through his lawyer, but Warner Bros. Didn't wait for a court case. They didn't bother with an investigation or some lengthy internal review. Within days of the story breaking, they cut all ties with Ratner and his production company, Rat Pack Entertainment, ending what had been one of the most lucrative production partnerships the studio had. In less than a week, one of Hollywood's most bankable names, a man whose films had earned billions at the global box office, was wiped off the industry map. And just like Ratner, this next director was exposed right after he got one of the biggest recognitions of his career. Bryan Singer directed The Usual Suspects, 4 X-Men films, and even the legendary Superman Returns. And then in late 2018, he directed most parts of Bohemian Rhapsody, a film about Freddie Mercury that became a global phenomenon, earning over $900 million at the box office, and landing a Best Picture nomination at the Academy Awards.
You know it's the highest grossing biopic of all time now? Yeah. How do you feel about that? Very proud. No, the music. Yeah. You're not taking any credit for it? It's great news. I'm not really proud. Thank you. All right, man.
The day after that nomination was announced, The Atlantic published one of the most devastating investigative pieces Hollywood had ever seen. It was the result of 12 months of reporting, with more than 50 interviews conducted, and at the center of it were 4 men who alleged that Bryan Singer had used them when they were minors. But the shocking aspect wasn't the story itself, but the fact that inside Hollywood, Bryan Singer's criminal activities were well known, and it had been casually allowed to happen. And some viewers confirmed this, saying, anyone in Hollywood from the mid-90s on knew about Bryan's parties. The allegations were so well known that over 4,000 students, faculty members, and alumni at the University of Southern California had signed a petition asking the school to take Singer's name off of one of its programs, the Bryan Singer Division of Cinema and Media Studies. The Atlantic's investigation described a network where men with their own industry connections would identify vulnerable teenage boys, bring them to Singer's parties and homes in Los Angeles, and deliver them into an environment where alcohol flowed freely, where age was no barrier to entry, and where Singer allegedly had routine access to minors. One of the accusers was Victor Valdovinos. He was 13 years old when he worked as an extra on Singer's 1998 film, Apt Pupil, a film about a teenager who discovers a Nazi war criminal living next door. During production, Valdovinos alleged that Singer repeatedly entered the locker room where child extras were changing and showering, and on multiple occasions, grabbed his genitals through his towel while he stood there, wet and half-dressed. Another accuser, Cesar Sanchez Guzman, filed a lawsuit in 2017 alleging that Singer forcefully had his way with him aboard a yacht in Seattle in 2003. He was 17 at the time. According to his account, Singer told him to keep his mouth shut because nobody was going to believe him. Two further anonymous accusers told The Atlantic that they had each had sexual contact with Singer at ages 15 and 17, and that Singer was fully aware of their ages. Singer denied everything. He called the Atlantic report a homophobic smear piece timed to take advantage of the success of Bohemian Rhapsody. But Hollywood had heard and seen enough. Weeks before filming for Bohemian Rhapsody wrapped, Singer had already been fired from the production. The official statement was that he abandoned the set without explanation. But then the same week he was fired, Cesar Sanchez Guzman filed his lawsuit, and the Atlantic expose followed not long after. Bryan Singer was fired from his next film, Red Sonja, as no distributor would attach their name to a project connected to him. The same Hollywood that had hired him again and again suddenly couldn't move fast enough to get his name off their projects. But of all the Hollywood directors that were exposed, there is no bigger hypocrite than this next director. Paul Haggis wrote $1 Million Baby. He wrote Casino Royale, and in 2006, his film Crash, a drama about racial tension, moral blindness, and the quiet violence of people who refuse to see themselves clearly, won the Academy Award for Best Picture.
Crash was nominated for 6 Academy Awards tonight, winning 3 for Film Editing, Original Screenplay, and Best Motion Picture.
In Hollywood, Haggis had proven himself as a serious filmmaker and a moral voice. In October 2017, when Harvey Weinstein's crimes finally became public, Haggis was among the first in the industry to speak out. He condemned Weinstein and aligned himself with the victims, standing on the right side of this moment. However, that same year, a film publicist named Haley Breest filed a civil lawsuit against him. In January 2013, Breest had attended a film premiere, and afterwards, Haggis invited her back to his apartment in Soho, where she alleged that Haggis compelled her to perform on him and then had his way with her. She said she told him to stop, and he didn't. Breest had initially kept quiet about the encounter, but when she saw Haggis presenting himself as an advocate for women in the aftermath of Weinstein, she decided she couldn't stay silent. She said, "This man f***ed me, and he's presenting himself as a champion of women to the world." The case went to civil trial in 2022, where 4 additional women took the stand and testified about their own unwanted and coercive sexual encounters with Haggis, talking about incidents dating as far back as 1996. And when Haggis was asked about Breest in court, he claimed he had no memory of having intercourse with her. He admitted oral sex had occurred, but insisted he had fallen asleep and remembered nothing after that. What he didn't count on was that Haley Breest had kept the tights she was wearing that night. She had held onto them from January 2013, the night it happened, all the way through years of legal proceedings. Her attorneys had them tested, and the bodily fluid found in the interior of those tights was confirmed by a DNA expert at trial to be a match to Paul Haggis. The jury found him liable on all counts and ordered him to pay $10 million in damages. But things didn't end there. Haggis simultaneously faced a criminal assault allegation in Italy, where he had been arrested in 2022 after a woman accused him of assaulting her over 2 days. That case was eventually dismissed in 2025, but the civil verdict in New York, that one stood. As of January 2026, Haggis settled the Breest case for approximately $2 million, a fraction of what the jury awarded. He claimed that he had spent all of his money fighting the case. But while Paul Haggis paid a fraction for his misdeed, this next director confessed to abusing an actress live on camera and was never held accountable. Bernardo Bertolucci. The directors we've mentioned so far have spent years denying the allegations leveled at them, but Bernardo Bertolucci didn't bother. He was one of the most decorated directors in the history of cinema. His 1987 movie about the last ruler of Imperial China, titled The Last Emperor, got 9 Academy Awards in 1988, including Best Picture and Best Director.
The winner is Bernardo Bertolucci for The Last Emperor.
Bertolucci was celebrated at Cannes, honored at Venice, and given a Lifetime Achievement tribute by the very industry that would later have to reckon with what he had admitted, on camera, to doing to a 19-year-old woman. It happened in 1972, on the set of Last Tango in Paris. Bertolucci directed a scene where Marlon Brando's character uses a stick of butter to assault a young woman on the floor of a Paris apartment. While the scene came out to be one of the most controversial moments in cinema history, what most people watching did not know was that the scene was not included in the script that the actress had agreed to. The actress, Maria Schneider, didn't know until the cameras were already rolling that she was going to be assaulted, and it wasn't going to be an act. Bertolucci and Brando had discussed it privately between themselves the morning of the shoot, and Bertolucci spoke about it years later in an interview.
It's an idea that I had with Marlon in the morning before shooting it. But I've been, in a way, horrible to Maria because I didn't tell her what was going on. Because I wanted her reaction as a girl, not as an actress. I wanted her to react, and she felt humiliated.
Bertolucci did not give her the chance to prepare, consent, or refuse because he wanted her humiliation to be real and her distress to be genuine. He wanted to capture something on film that no actress could fake because it wouldn't be acting. It would be happening to her. In that scene, Maria Schneider was acting. She was publicly humiliated by one of the most powerful men in Hollywood at the time. In an interview years later, Maria described how she felt violated by Bertolucci.
Felt like we've been manipulated. Even he felt manipulated, raped by Bertolucci, and he rejected the movie afterwards for many, many years.
Maria spent the rest of her life trying to escape the shadow of that scene and that film. She struggled with severe depression and battled addiction. She said the way the world received Last Tango, the way critics celebrated it, and the way the industry praised Bertolucci for it caused her lasting psychological damage. She never spoke to Bertolucci again, and she died of cancer in 2011. In November 2018, Bertolucci died at the age of 77. He died as a celebrated master of world cinema, but people never forgot what he did, calling him sadistic through the criminal personality. Maria Schneider never got an apology. She wasn't even acknowledged in her prime. All she got was a film that the world called a masterpiece and a life spent trying to recover from making it. And like Bertolucci, this next director was never charged despite the allegations and is still in the business of making films. Woody Allen. Woody Allen is one of the most prolific and decorated filmmakers in American history. His movies like Annie Hall, Manhattan, Hannah and Her Sisters, and Midnight in Paris and Portfolio. Woody Allen had gathered decades of acclaimed work, awards, and had several A-list actors lining up to collaborate with him, many of whom would later say publicly that they regretted it. In August 1992, Woody Allen's 7-year-old adopted daughter, Dylan Farrow, told her mother, actress Mia Farrow, that Woody Allen had assaulted her. She said that Woody had led her by the hand into a dim attic at their Connecticut home, told her to lie on her stomach and play with a toy train set while he sexually abused her.
I loved my father. I respected him. He was my hero. And that doesn't obviously take away from what he did, but it does make the betrayal and the hurt that much more.
The timing of this allegation is so important because 8 months before Dylan came forward, Mia Farrow had found nude photographs of her own adopted daughter, Soon-Yi Previn, in Woody's apartment. The discovery of those photos revealed that Woody had been having a secret sexual relationship with Soon-Yi, a young woman he had helped raise as a daughter, and he ended up marrying her. Viewers made a note of this, saying, "Regardless of the truth, this man married his stepdaughter that he knew from childhood, and that is creepy enough for me." This discovery ended Woody's marriage to Mia Farrow, and Dylan's allegations months later only made things worse. However, Woody Allen denied the allegations, saying that it was fabricated by Dylan and Mia as a form of revenge after his affair with Soon-Yi was discovered. He even held a press conference trying to clear his name and reveal Mia Farrow's motives for the allegations.
That sources close to Mia Farrow have released to the public allegations instigated by her of child abuse on my part. This, my lawyers tell me, is a currently popular, though heinous card played in all too many of child custody fights, and while sometimes effective, the tragedy of programming one's child to cooperate is
Woody Allen's case was looked into by investigators from the Child Sexual Abuse Clinic at Yale New Haven Hospital, who concluded they could not determine whether abuse had occurred. So, criminal charges were not filed against him. However, in 2014, Dylan published an open letter describing in precise detail what she said had happened in that attic. She addressed it directly to the film community, the directors who kept hiring him, the actors who kept saying yes, and the awards bodies that kept nominating him. Hollywood took notice again, but only for a short while. It wasn't until 2018, at the height of the Me Too scandal, that Woody started getting some backlash. Actors who had worked with him publicly distanced themselves, expressing regret. Amazon dropped its distribution deal with him, and studios also kept their distance, but it wasn't a complete shutout. And in 2021, HBO released Allen v. Farrow, a 4-part documentary series that presented the case in full. Home video footage, contemporaneous evidence, Dylan's testimony, and accounts from people who had been inside that family. After the series was released, Woody Allen maintained his stance, claiming that Mia and her daughter were just out to destroy his image and career, and that never happened. Woody has never stopped working and has never stopped making films, but while Woody Allen was not criminally charged, this next director was convicted as a predator, but Hollywood gave him a career anyway. Victor Salva. Victor Salva's crime was not a well-kept secret. It was a matter of public record. It had been reported in the newspapers. He had pleaded guilty in open court, but somehow he got hired by studios and was made a franchise director. Salva's first feature film was a low-budget 1989 horror called Clown House, a story about three young brothers terrorized by escaped circus clowns. The film starred a 12-year-old boy named Nathan Forrest Winters. During the production of that film, Salva sexually abused him several times, and he filmed it.
First time that I remember there being any kind of touching or abuse, I was staying the night at his house, his apartment, and we were watching movies, and one of the movies he put on to watch was Jungle Book. We got two bandanas and tied them together and made this loincloth, and as he's tying them, he's like fondling me, and that's like my first memory of when the abuse started.
When police raided Salva's home, they found 2 homemade videotapes of Salva forcing Nathan to perform oral sex on him. They also found commercial photography magazines. Salva was arrested and charged, and he pleaded guilty to 5 felony counts: lewd and lascivious conduct, or with a person under 14, and 3 counts of producing child pornography. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison, but he served only 15 months. After serving his sentence, Salva was registered as a lifetime sex offender, and apparently deciding that was sufficient, he got back to working as a filmmaker. He began developing his next project, and when he needed a production company to back it, he found one. Hollywood Pictures, a subsidiary of Walt Disney, a company that prides itself in protecting the innocence of children. This was a studio that had built an entire global empire in the trust of families, yet it chose to produce a film directed by a man who had been convicted of sexually assaulting a 12-year-old boy and making child of it. The film was called Powder, and it was released in 1995. Nathan Forrest Winters found out Disney was releasing the film and organized a public protest outside the premiere. He stood outside the theater with a sign, gave interviews, and tried, with his own name and his own face, to make people understand what kind of man they were about to hand their money to.
He's been coddled completely by certain members of Hollywood, and big names in Hollywood have been backing him and throughout the entire process. It just seems like there's like an exclusive club, and Victor's a part of that club.
But Disney released the film anyway, and it didn't end there. Salva went on to direct Jeepers Creepers in 2001, which became a genuine horror hit and spawned multiple sequels, all produced and distributed by major studios that were fully aware of his criminal history. He became, by any measure, a commercially successful Hollywood director. In 2017, Salva directed Jeepers Creepers 3, and the audience was appalled to find that Salva had made the story darker by including dialogue that appeared to justify the sexual abuse of children. Some of those lines that were only quietly removed after public backlash forced the studio's hand. Viewers also pointed out the fact that the monster in the movie likes young boys and uses their body parts for its replenishment. One user on Reddit asked, "Is the monster Victor Salva? You see how the monster preserves his young victims, locking them in age and time, just like how abuse victims get locked in by the trauma." However, while Victor Salva was writing child abuse apologetics into studio horror films, another director was fighting the largest civil verdict in New York State history involving nearly 400 women. James Toback. In April 2025, a New York State jury delivered the largest civil verdict in the history of the state, totaling $1.68 billion. The man ordered to pay it was 79-year-old Hollywood director James Toback, and the circumstances leading to how that number came to exist are one of the most surprising cases of predatory behavior the American film industry has ever produced. While for most people the name James Toback might not ring a bell, inside Hollywood, Toback has street cred. He had an Oscar nomination for writing Bugsy, and had directed films like The Pickup Artist and Black and White. He had a Harvard degree, a reputation as an intellectual, and a network of industry connections he had spent decades carefully cultivating, and he used all of it as a weapon. Toback had a planned scheme. He was a serial predator. He would approach women on the street, in places like Central Park, restaurants, and sometimes hotel lobbies. He would walk up to a stranger, introduce himself, mention his Harvard credentials, drop the names of famous people he knew, and present himself as a man who could open doors.
I was in New York, 20 years ago, trying to be an actress. I was sitting in this hotel, and he comes up to me with this tote bag, And then he pulls out every newspaper article that's ever been written about him. This is pre-internet, so it's like he was bringing the internet to me.
Oh.
He's like, look, I'm a famous producer and I'm gonna put you in the movies. And I was like, finally, it's happening. You know?
Well, you were excited about it?
Yeah, he's like, you're gonna be the next Marilyn Monroe. I'm like, he gets it.
Then he would invite them to meet him at a hotel room, at his editing studio, at his mother's apartment on the Upper East Side, at the Harvard Club of New York City. Each invite was always under the pretense of an audition, a screen test, or a meeting about a role. And when these women arrived for the audition, Toback had promised it was never what he said it would be. In an interview with Jimmy Kimmel, actress Natasha Leggero talks about her own encounter with James Toback.
We go there, and I think we had to climb a little fence, and he's like, let me see this armpit hair. And so I show it to him, I let it down, and he's like, now I'm gonna have to pleasure myself. And so he started to hump a tree.
Other actresses, including Selma Blair, Rachel McAdams, and Julianne Moore, were among those who came forward describing what happened when they met Toback. Toback allegedly told victims he had connections to organized crime. He threatened them that he would destroy their careers if they spoke. He said he would have them physically harmed, and he made them feel that their silence was the price of their safety and their ambition. This went on for 4 decades, from the 1970s through the 2010s. But things began to unravel in October 2017. The Los Angeles Times published its first investigation, and before then, only 38 women had come forward. But within days of the investigation being made public, that number had grown to nearly 400. All of them who had been waiting, separately, in silence, for someone else to go first. A 2022 civil lawsuit brought by 40 of those women finally made it to trial in New York. Toback, by that point, had stopped participating in his own defense. He didn't show up, didn't engage, and offered no meaningful response to the evidence presented against him. The jury awarded $280 million in compensatory damages and $1.4 billion in punitive damages, a total of $1.68 billion to be split across 40 women who had each carried their story alone for years, sometimes decades, before anyone was willing to listen. But after judgment was passed, Toback said he was broke. He said he had no assets, no funds, nothing to collect. He's involved in the largest sexual assault verdict in New York State history, and he's saying he cannot pay a single dollar. He has also denied the allegations, saying that for decades, it had been biologically impossible for him to engage in the behavior described by the women in the story. His excuse is that he has diabetes and a heart condition that requires medication. Although a verdict has been reached, James Toback is still sitting at home free, and this is what these stories have in common. Despite these powerful men being exposed as predators, Hollywood has decided, over and over again, the talent was a good enough reason to look away.